Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. You're watching The Future is Female, the show where we find the extraordinary in every woman. But not just that, it's also the show where we advocate for society, policymakers and businesses to view men and women through the same lens. It's a particularly exciting episode for us today as we're celebrating International Women's Day, and joining us on the show we have YB Hannah Yeoh, former Deputy Minister of Women, Family and Community Development. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Melissa.
She's also a DAP Member of Parliament for Segambut, as well as the former Speaker for the Selangor State Assembly and the first woman in the role, and also the youngest Speaker of any legislative assembly here in Malaysia. So it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for celebrating International Women's Day with us on The Future is Female. It's been a bit of an exciting couple of weeks, hasn't it? And in light of everything that's happened, all the political developments in the past couple of weeks, how have you been coping with this, with a sudden change? I mean, it's been a sudden change, hasn't it?
It took me a few days to get over the fact that we are no longer in power in Putrajaya. But at the same time, even though you feel sad, but it's also mixed with anger because you feel that you have been robbed of something that you worked really, really hard for. It's different from losing an election because, you know, in an election you feel that it's fair, and this is done by or initiated by people who were formerly together with you in the same team.
Right.
And so that hurts even more.
Was the suddenness, did the suddenness add to that, the feeling of, bewilderment?
Definitely. I think it all happened so quickly, even for Malaysians. I think even today, people are still talking about it in the market, on the roadside. Everybody's asking, how are you coping? How are you coping? And don't give up,
Right.
we'll come back stronger. So definitely, I think people have that sense of loss. Yeah, what has just happened.
What about your job? So essentially it was overnight, you lost your job, and all the work that you were doing as, co-leading this ministry. How did you feel in terms of the setback to what you wanted to accomplish in this role?
We were aiming for a lot of things to be tabled in this coming March sitting.
The sexual harassment bill?
Definitely, yes. And also the restructuring. We were looking at establishing an agency for children and also looking at increasing our manpower for Pelindung Kanak-Kanak, protector for children. And as a result now, when Parliament sitting is going to be pushed back up to May, definitely some of these important works will be delayed. Yeah.
What are you most proud of having accomplished in the ministry?
I think in the last 20 months, what I really like, the fact that we showed to Malaysians that this particular ministry is not just a babysitting ministry. For a long time...
is that the perception? Was that the perception going? Okay.
Just look after social work, just look after women issue. But, to have the Deputy Prime Minister leading this ministry, I think we have proven in the last 20 months that we have to be taken seriously. And there's so many things that we can do to actually improve the livelihood or the family environment, not just for women, but also for children. Yeah.
So you said it was 20 months in the role, right? Were there realities to this role that I guess you perhaps weren't expecting when you first got the job?
I think everybody assumed that when you go to Putrajaya, all the infrastructure, everything is ready for you, at the command of the fingertips at a meeting table, everything will be rolled out in Malaysia. But what I found interesting is that in this particular ministry or this area, social, family, I felt the previous government, I'm talking about the Barisan Nasional government back then, did not invest enough into building capacity and also did not provide enough for that supporting structure to capture some of these important changes that are affecting children. For something like children, 30% of your population, 9 million children below 18 years old in Malaysia. For such a core group of our population, we don't have an agency looking after their rights.
Okay.
Today, if you're talking about child rights, very few ordinary Malaysians actually understand that children have rights.
I mean, children are often seen to be secondary, right? I mean, always seen, never heard.
That's right. And that's why I felt that we were on the way to make some very important structural changes to ensure that the federal government would always allocate enough budget to promote, the well-being of our children, and that's why only in the last 20 months you hear people talking about breakfast for children, car seat, that children have rights when they enter a vehicle to be safe. Things like that are being talked about by, the Harapan government, and it's sad to see this come to an end. We do hope that, we will be able to be given a chance, an opportunity again to work on these issues.
I mean, in other countries, governments, I guess people who win elections, or coalitions or parties that win elections come and go, but the civil service that makes up government work carries on, right? So policies have a certain element of continuity. Do you see that happening at all this time around?
I trust that this round, civil service, having tasted governance from both sides, will be able to exercise their independence, and also because they have tasted how things can be different, how a clean government can function, and how you can actually save money. I mean, in the last 20 months, my minister and I, we helped to save 2 million just from cutting wastages from unnecessary big celebration to making sure that we focus more on policy changes. Just 20 months, 2 million in a ministry like ours.
In terms of savings,
that's right.
From just cutting down on celebrations and whatnot.
Major celebrations. Let's just focus on policies that actually impact our target group. Yeah.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Don't you go anywhere. We're going to continue with YB Hannah Yeoh right here on The Future's Female. Stay tuned. Happy International Women's Day. We're celebrating today with YB Hannah Yeoh, MP for Segambut. Now, I want to talk about one of the causes that you champion, that you're passionate about, which is keeping women at work. The female labour force participation rate, making sure that women don't fall out of the labour pipeline. And we've done pretty well. Malaysia's done pretty well in terms of achieving gender parity in education. But unfortunately, there is a significant number of women who don't remain in the workforce. They tend to drop out. Now, based on your observations while you were in the ministry, why do you think some of those reasons are?
Basically, there are two reasons why women drop out from participating in the workforce. One is for childcare, and number two is to look after their parents. And so, for our ministry, we want to improve the supporting structure to keep women in the workforce. We were looking at 54% before this, and this year targeting it to improve to 56.5%. And for you to improve that number, you have to ensure that you improve the infrastructure to keep women in the workforce. So we're looking at increasing childcare in the workplace for civil service, and also at the same time touching into other benefits, for example, maternity leave, paternity leave, flexi working hours, working from home policy, just to help women be able to cope and to juggle between their role at home and also in the office.
Would these, measures be better implemented in government, in the civil service, or is this a private sector-led initiative?
Actually, the private sector, they don't have to wait for the government to roll it out first. They can also, on their own, execute these family-friendly policies. And I'm sure many different big corporations have done that. It's just that for us in the last 20 months, we wanted to show to the private sector that the government must take this seriously first. And so we lack the authority. If we fail to provide childcare in the workplace for our nurses, for our policemen, how do we tell private sector, hey, you got to do this for your staff? And that's why we were focusing a lot on improving provision of childcare in the workplace for our frontliners first, doctors, teachers, nurses.
So, so increasing crashes at work.
That's right.
For policemen, for nurses?
Yes. For the first time last year, 2019, we were given 10 million to create 65 childcare in the workplace for federal agencies, targeting at police stations, immigration, prison, and also hospitals.
What
and
was
this
the
year,
response?
3 times increase, 30 million given by Ministry of Finance.
What was the response from last year?
The frontliners felt very taken care of because, you know, the nurses looking after babies in the hospital ward have to worry about who's looking after their own babies at home. And it doesn't make sense for frontliners to be worrying about what's happening at home if they have to fight crime, they have to, you know, battle sicknesses, looking after those who are sick in the hospital. And that's why such important infrastructure have been neglected by the previous government. After 60 years.
Well, okay, so you said a little bit earlier that the private sector doesn't
have to wait.
Yeah, they don't need to wait for government. But the Malaysian Employees Federation (MEF) has said that the lack of government incentives has been the reason why the private sector is dragging its feet in terms of setting up childcare centres at the workplace. Do you agree? I mean, the fact that does the private sector need a little bit of a push or an incentive to ensure these practices are put into place?
We definitely have more incentive now. You know, we have tax deduction for people who renovate their business premises to create TASCA or childcare in their office, and then we have tax deduction for parents who send their children to a registered TASCA. Unfortunately, like I said, a lot of people were not really aware of this incentive because we lack personalities back then to talk about these issues, to bring this issue to the front line, to talk about it in Parliament, to talk about it, you know, in the mainstream news. And that's why I say it's very important not to view this ministry as a babysitting ministry, but, you know, what happens to our 9 million children will affect and determine the quality or the future of future workers in this nation. And that's why if you don't care for children this particular time, you continue to have children being violated physically, sexually, and all kinds of violation. And if you don't rehabilitate, you don't help them recover, they are going to be very quickly turned into teenagers, into young parents, and then the entire vicious cycle will repeat itself.
So this is taking care of the family at the core, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, it's not just about children. I mean, you talked about taking care of parents as well, and especially this kind of sandwich generation, taking care of young children, elderly parents. How do we make sure that, you know, women and children and elderly parents are also taken care of? What can we be doing to keep women at work and not worrying about their parents?
I think the society really needs to be more understanding, and understanding that, you know, when you are talking about businesses today, it's no longer about just dollar and cent. At the end of the day, when you interview young people now looking for jobs, they ask you about work-life balance. They ask you about how many days of rest can they have. You know, what kind of other supporting infrastructure do you give to them?
Working from home, working.
That's
you know,
right. And
mobile
also,
working.
And also, WhatsApp has really transformed or changed the way we work. We don't clock out at 5 p.m. from our office and then
we're
go
on the
home.
phones all the time, right?
On Saturday and on Sunday. And that's why employers really have to understand the changing dimension of workplace today. You cannot really define workplace as just an office station or from the work desk. It is really, you know, 12 hours a day.
Okay, so if, you know, we have HR managers watching today, people in decision-making positions in corporates, thinking about how they can keep their women working in the workforce, what are some of the concrete suggestions you would have them think about?
I think you can talk to a few agencies, you can talk to Talent Corp, you can also talk to some of the big corporations. They have implemented this. Of course, you can say they have the financial capacity to roll this out, but I believe that small companies can also work out, you know, your own supporting infrastructure for your team. At the end of the day, happy workers will stay a long time with you and they can become more productive. So you really need to be able to cater to their needs and understanding their needs. And today, you know, every household, usually you need dual income. And for them to sustain their families, you have to ensure that, you know, at the end of the day, you want good people to remain active in the workforce and contribute, so that you are no longer dependent just on foreign labor. And so you have to find ways to maximize your women potential in Malaysia. And, you know, 56.5% this year, that's our target. That tells you that almost the other half population are still found at home. And we really need to do more to support them.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and continue this conversation after this. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Future's Female. I'm Melisa Idris and I'm speaking to YB Hannah Yeoh, MP for Segambut. We're celebrating International Women's Day, and I want to get your thoughts on women in politics and leadership. I want to talk about how we treat our women politicians, our women leaders. I mean, we've seen sexist commentary, we've seen trolling online. Women in positions of power are labelled confident or ambitious. They're often portrayed as unlikable, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Has that been your reality all the years that you've spent in politics and in a leadership position?
Today, there are more of us in Parliament and at the state assemblies. In Parliament now, we have about 14% women, and we have 33 women MPs in Parliament. And so there are definitely more of us, but not enough. What I like about today is when somebody makes a very insensitive remark to any women politicians, our supporters and our peers will speak up for us. And it's very interesting to see how things have changed. Somebody commented that, as a deputy minister, you should be wearing lipsticks. Or, people will be asking the Minister for Science, so when you are on maternity leave, who will be doing your work? Some of these remarks are uncalled for, but I'm glad that the people have learned to respond and to take this, to say this is unacceptable in today's culture. So definitely there's more awareness now.
Somebody said to you that wearing lipstick would make you
online remark. You should be wearing
trolls.
You should be wearing lipstick now that you are a deputy minister. I'm after that episode, I received so many remarks or emails from women from different professions telling me that they are so glad that somebody spoke up. That makeup really does not determine the quality of your work, and there are so many challenges that women go through when they go to work.
So, are you saying that you've seen an evolution in your time in politics? You've seen the sexist remarks get called out, perhaps fewer comments in Parliament that are deemed unacceptable?
Yes.
Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, people will not just take it lying down. They will ensure that you issue an apology. There is definitely greater awareness today. What I really hope Malaysians will do is not to judge the ability of a woman by her marital status. A lot of times when a capable woman is leading an agency, usually people make remarks like, oh, is she single? Or maybe that's why. Or, maybe she's married without children. Or usually when you see a strong woman, people will always ask, I wonder how's her husband like? Things like that. You never say that to a man who is leading the agency.
Yes.
I wonder how the wife is like at home, So these are some of the remarks I think must change, and society must learn to change with, the times.
How would you respond to someone like who says that in a way that it is a teaching moment?
I think you don't have to worry about speaking up. And the consequences that come, because people will back you up today. And I think under the leadership of Tun Dr. Mahathir, he put a lot of women in very key leading positions. For example, the Chief Justice, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Bank Governor. You have the person who's leading MECC, also a woman. And it's so many different agencies and GLCs. The last Prime Minister.
Are you optimistic about the future of women in leadership positions in Malaysia?
Under the current Prime Minister, Tan Sri Muhyiddin, if you look at their lineup, Perikatan Nasional, right, I'm not optimistic.
Well, we don't have the cabinet yet, and perhaps we might.
But if you're looking at the pool of MPs giving their support from the other side,
because you don't have to look at where it's coming from.
A lot of the young MPs are all from our side. Yeah, DAP, PKR, Warisan. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll see more young women entering politics, so that pool gets bigger and deeper. And finally, in the last couple of minutes that we have left in the show, I just want to bring the conversation back to young women, young girls. I mean, I feel that young girls growing up in this day and age, they are faced with so many disempowering or negative messaging and pressure points that perhaps you and I never had to grapple with when we were growing up. What message, Hannah, would you like to instill in girls and young women today? And also, what would you like to say to the parents of these young women?
For the young girls, my message to you is to stay true to yourself. Be yourself. You don't have to copy and to change yourself to follow another person, because all of us have different strengths. And when you realize your own strength, then you can perform your best. And for parents, it's very important to identify the strength in your girls, what they're good at. Your first child is different from your second child, and never to focus just on the straight A's, because life is just really beyond exam performance. And if your daughter is good in music, encourage her to grow that, because that is God-given talent. Makes us special, and so that's how my husband and I, we raise our daughters, to tell them that it's important to study, but it's not everything. Yeah, and to identify your strength, and then parents help them grow. At the end of the day, I think what really separates a person from the rest is your core value system, your conviction. That differentiates you from the rest of your peers. Whether you're in an institution or in a workplace, people like to work with people who have value system. And so that's something that we really need to instill in our young people.
Okay, a strong sense of the values that you hold dear.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking
Thank you
with
for
me.
having me.
It was an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I'm Melisa Idris. That's all the time we have on The Future is Female. Thank you so much for celebrating International Women's Day with us. I will see you same time next week. Thank you for watching, and good night.